Hi everybody, welcome back to English 247. This is for our class for Thursday, the 19th, where we are transitioning from Jane Eyre into Emily Dickinson and, believe it or not, the ending of the semester. So I wanted to draw your attention to the notes below just to show you the course outline and where we are. That today, the 19th, we will be talking about some Dickinson, and then on the 24th, Tuesday, we'll finish up with Dickinson and any leftovers that we have with Jane Eyre and talk about incidents in the life of a slave girl. And then on the 26th, we will talk about the awakening, meaning that the 1st of July, if all goes well, can be a class that's devoted to working on paper number 2. And as you know, paper number 2 is very similar to paper number 1, 4 to 5 pages in length, a critical paper, so you shouldn't be using outside resources. And it should be in response to one of the later texts in the semester. So my suspicion is that you'll either be writing about Jane Eyre or incidents in the life of a slave girl or the awakening. Now, Dickinson is indeed a possibility, but writing about a poem is a kind of different exercise than writing about a novel. Just like Story of an Hour and writing about a short story is a very different kind of exercise than writing about a novel. And I'm giving you the same prompt about how a text could ruin a girl, but certainly you can create your own prompt. Just make sure that you have it approved by me. And if all goes well, that means on the 3rd of July, we have a catch-up class for any odds and ends that might occur for the semester before we go into the 4th of July holiday. And our semester ends after the 4th of July holiday on the 8th of July, which is a Tuesday. And what I will be doing is posting the final exam at 9 a.m., giving you 24 hours in which to respond to that exam. If you were taking this exam in a face-to-face situation, you'd have approximately 2 hours or so, which is as long as you should be basically devoting to the final, even though you have 24 hours. And I just ask that you send that to my email, ruiz, R-U-I-Z, at gcc.mass.edu, because that's how my grading program works best. And you send that to me along with paper number 2. This would be the very last time that you could hand in paper number 2, would be the ending of the semester. Though certainly you are encouraged to submit in paper number 2 ahead of time. And if you elect to take or elect to write a revision for paper number 1, that would also be due by the ending of the semester. So you can see that what I've done is I've given you the links for Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl and The Awakening in the event that you wanted to read ahead a bit. And of course, I ordered the text for those. And while we're not necessarily done with Jane Eyre, I wanted to at least introduce the idea of Emily Dickinson. And Emily Dickinson, being a local poet from Amherst, is especially, I think, important considering where we live in Western Massachusetts. And there's a biography that's a bit dated, but I think it gives a good overview of Dickinson's life, as well as gives you a good sampling of many of her poems. She wrote over 1,000, by the way. And the documentary is 56 minutes long, so I'm going to make this short so that you can watch that documentary, and you can see that the link is below. It's called Voices and Visions, and Emily Dickinson will be a poet that is one of the many poets that they examine, but we are focusing just on their examination of Emily Dickinson. And I have included a link from the Poetry Foundation that lists some, not all, of her poems. And obviously, we can't read all of her poems. What I'm going to do for today's attendance question is leave it pretty open-ended when it comes to Emily Dickinson. And I'm going to ask you to identify a poem Perhaps it's something that was highlighted in the documentary. Perhaps it's something on the Poetry Foundation website. Perhaps it is just a personal favorite of yours or something that was included in the text that I had ordered for class, Final Harvest, which is such an important text because it shows Emily Dickinson's poetry in its original form, which is something that the documentary will talk about. But regardless, either identify an Emily Dickinson poem or even a line within it, an Emily Dickinson poem that you find to be particularly powerful and explain why. And the documentary will talk about what an enigma Emily Dickinson is with her writing. And I must admit that when I first started learning about Emily Dickinson in college, I didn't much care for her because I struggled with trying to understand her poetry. And once I realized that some of the scholars and literary critics who studied Dickinson were also struggling to understand her poetry, even though they devoted their lives to it, I felt much better about it. Now she's become one of my favorite poets, which just goes to show how things can change over the course of time. But don't necessarily feel compelled to pick a poem or even a line from a poem that makes sense to you. It could be something that you're not necessarily sure about, but for whatever reason, you find it to be particularly powerful. So as I said, that documentary is 56 minutes long, so I'm going to leave you to watch this and to find something from Emily Dickinson for our attendance question, which will be due on Saturday the 20th. But of course, if you need additional time, please let me know. Of course, you're not required to respond to your classmates, but you are required to read their responses and my responses in turn. And then next class, we will talk about Emily Dickinson, Jane Eyre, and also incidents in the life of a slave girl. I hope you're doing well. I'm doing well. And we will continue on next class. Take care. Bye bye.